Hey, hello, and welcome to the OnStage Colorado Podast. Once again, I'm Alex Miller.
And I'm Tony Tresca. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the official podcast of OnStageColorado.com. We are the only weekly conversation show dedicated to the Centennial State's live performance scene. So Thank you for being here.
Yeah. We're recording on March 10th. So if you're listening on or after Tuesday, March 11th, think about that in terms of when we're saying this is coming up. So we're still buzzing from the New Play Summit at the Denver Center. So we decided this episode to take a look into what the state is doing to incubate new work. So that'll be coming up here in just a little bit.
Yep. So we'll be rounding up new play festivals across the state for those writers and audiences who are eager to participate in that part of the new play process. And later in the show, we are going to air Alex's interview with Brian Colonna of Buntport Theater and artist Regan Linton about their collaboration on The Menagerist. So what can listeners expect from that conversation, Alex?
Yeah, well, it was a great conversation just talking about that collaboration. There's, Regan is a disabled artist, and they tapped her to kind of dive into the whole glass menagerie aspect of that play that has Laura as just sort of vaguely disabled. I don't think it's ever truly specified. And so they kind of took that and ran with it. And so they talked about how they collaborated. I think they've been kicking around the idea for a couple of years. And so that's up now. So that'll be coming up a little later.
And you and I both saw that play this weekend.
Yes, indeed. I was there on Saturday. You were there opening night. What was your initial take?
My initial take on it is I think it was a really interesting idea. There's definitely a lot to explore in terms of the problematic aspects of disability in terms of the glass menagerie. And it's not only about that specific play itself. The play is really kind of satirizing the larger context in which theater directors and casting folks kind of pigeonhole disabled actors into specific roles or specific types of roles that they're expected to repeat over and over again for a largely non-disabled audience. So I think there's a lot of merit to that idea. Where I kind of quibbled with it a little bit was in some of the execution. It's kind of framed around a repetition of this scene in which Laura is kind of being ultimately rejected by this man who her brother brings in to have her woo. And this device is repeated multiple times, kind of over and over again, in which they kind of swap out exactly how it's framed or how it's portrayed. And it just kind of got old after a little while. What did you think, Alex?
Yeah, I think that's a fair critique. I will say that, it had a lot of all the things we love about Buntport. It had a lot of great performances. And it was really great to see Regan on there. She's a fantastic actor who has had mostly a lot of people knew her as the artistic director at Family, but she's certainly a great actor in her own right. And so it was really good to see her on stage. And there was a lot, the usual, like I called it in the interview, the lo-fi special effects that Buntport's kind of famous for. There was a lot of what do you call those things that kids like? I don't know, like an inflatable like duck kind of thing that you wear around your body. I don't know what they're actually called.
Those floaties.
Floaties, I guess. Yeah. So there were a lot of those, and one of them sort of, and then there was one that was writ large, a very large prop that came on, and that kind of thing.
Alex, in your interview, did you ask them if they made their own T-shirts themselves, or did they outsource that? Because Eric wears an ungodly amount of T-shirts that he pulls off throughout the show, revealing a variety of kind of joke titles or lines or from the scene or situation you're about to see.
Right. Yeah, I don't know that we talked about the T-shirts all that much, although it's maybe I forgot. But yeah, it reminded me a little bit of the Gutenberg the musical, where they swapped out hats
with the hats.
Yeah, in this case, he came on and he looked so Eric is a fairly thin fellow, so I was like, what is going on there? So, but yeah, lots of T-shirts, lots of floaties. And things like that. So I'll have a review of that up on the site here pretty soon.
What else did you see this weekend, Alex?
I did not see any. I went up to A Basin on Sunday and went skiing. I had some friend of mine got a spot at the beach there, right in front of the lifts, where and I was thinking it's almost like a performance art in itself. There's a lot of it's kind of like it sometimes reminds me of a little bit of like the Dead Show parking lot back in the day when I used to go to a lot of shows. When there's a lot of hippie action, but there's plenty of just all kinds of people out there. It was a really nice day. It was like in the 40s, so there were people out there wearing, guys mostly wearing nothing but shorts, and skiing in shorts, which is really not a great idea. No matter how good a skier you are, you're going to get snow coming up over your boots and wiggling down into your socks. So anyway, so that was the extent of my, I saw the Menagerist, and I had the opportunity to go out. And I don't get to ski a whole lot, so it was great to get out there.
Are you a very good skier?
Yeah, I'm not as good as I used to be since I don't ski as often, but I've been skiing since I was 5, and I was a lift operator for a couple of years, and so I guess I'm an expert skier. Do you ever get out, Tony?
I can't say that I do, and any time I have gone out, I've spent most of my time on my butt rather than upright with the skis in hand. I can't say that I'm inclined in that capacity. That's not my strength.
Yeah. Stick to theater, maybe.
That's right.
All right.
So this weekend, that was the only on stage show that I saw. I was supposed to catch Chess by Bright Heart Stages performing over at the People's Building, but the night I went to see, which was Saturday, so that would have been March 8th. The performance I went to was actually 100% sold out, and so they were like, "Sorry, we actually have to give away your ticket to accommodate the crowd." And I was like, "That's great news! I'm so happy to hear that. That's awesome. That's so awesome to hear a small upstart community theater doing so well in this day and age." And so I did not end up getting to see Chess because there were so many paying patrons who were there. So
did you actually go there and get turned away?
I did actually. I walked into the People's Building and they were like, "I'm sorry, we don't have you here. We can't accommodate this."
Yeah, I'm surprised they couldn't even sit you next to the light person or something. Anyway, well, you're right. That's great that they were able to sell that out.
Absolutely. And so to compensate for that, I caught Purple Rain, the 1984 Prince film. The Dolby theaters at the AMC chains were doing a re-release of the film, and I had never seen this musical before, and so I figured I'd check it out on the big screen ahead of its pre-Broadway tryout that's going on later this year in 2025 fall in Minneapolis's Hennepin Arts. So I was like kind of curious to see the source material before this kind of splashy Broadway adaptation makes its first debut. Are you a Prince fan, Alex? Any interest in this?
I'm not. I respect him. I thought he was a great artist. It's just not my thing. It's just I never was a big fan. But I'm surprised that Purple Rain hasn't been made into a musical yet. But I know there was a documentary that's floating around out there that I know there's a big thing with the estate of Prince that they don't want it to come out and this, that, and the other thing. So I don't know. Maybe that has something to do with the slowness of this property being, sourced in other ways.
Absolutely. Yeah, that documentary you referred to will never see the light of day, so it seems. It was supposed to be released by Netflix, but the estate objected to it, not over any factual errors, but because the attorneys said it would do generational harm to Prince's reputation if the film was released. And Netflix ultimately caved to that demand. And so we'll never see that documentary in question about Prince's alleged controlling behaviors and some of his more questionable relationships with the women in his life.
Yeah. Oh, well. So, all right. Well, what's going on in the news around Colorado theater this week, Tony?
So this week, the Arvada Center announced its 2025-2026 season, and it feels very traditional, I would say.
Yeah. Oh, and I will say I did ask. So I interviewed Lynn Collins for next week, the artistic director at Arvada, and I asked her specifically, is it Arvada or Arvada? And she said that Arvada is very specific about preferring the harder A sound, Arvada. Same way Nevada is not Nevada, it's Nevada. So try and keep that in mind.
Arvada.
Arvada. Yeah. Yeah, definitely traditional, definitely more in the line of crowd pleasing shows, kicking off with the Mousetrap, the Agatha Christie show. That's it's just one of the longest runs, if not the longest run of all time, when it was on stage. If maybe it still is, in its original run, I can't remember, but that'll be kicking off the season in September.
Yeah, and that's being directed by Lynn Collins herself. So if you want to hear more insight on that, tune back into the podcast next week for Alex's full conversation on that show and the entire season. The next play in the lineup is Lady Day at Emerson's Bar and Grill by Lainey Robertson. That's going to be in their Black Box Theater. It's directed by Christopher Page Sanders. It's September 26th through November 2nd. And this is a play with music set in a seedy bar in Philadelphia. And the audience is about to witness one of Billie Holiday's last performances. And the Arvada, is that right? Wait, did I just butcher it? I got it.
Yes.
The Arvada Center promises a cabaret complete with select tables on stage. So they're doing a little bit Natasha Pierre kind of vibe for this show.
We talked about that and how popular that was, and so they decided to come back with a cabaret thing. Next one is a hugely familiar title, Disney's Frozen. So this may sound like another safe thing, but it is sort of a regional premiere for regional theater. This is the first non-Broadway touring production of Frozen that will be coming through. So, this is where the Arvada Center really shines. Kenny Moten's directing. There's going to be another fantastic Brian Mulgrave set, I'm sure. So that should be a banger and time for and perfect for the holiday season. So November into early January.
Next up in the lineup is Romeo and Juliet by the very familiar William Shakespeare. This is being directed in the Black Box Theater by Lynn Collins. It runs February 13th through March 28th, so it's just in time for Valentine's Day, although it might make for an awkward car ride home if you take your sweetheart to that show.
Yeah, and then they close out the season with Come From Away, so that's the sort of September 12th musical, another directed also by Kenny Moten. So that'll be in March-May time frame. So yeah, it seems like also kind of a short, only 4 shows. Seems a little light. I don't know. I haven't added up what previous shows you're holding up. 5 is usually 5.
There's 5 shows.
There's 5.
Mousetrap, Lady Day, Frozen, Romeo and Juliet, and Come From Away.
Okay. Well, I don't know. How does that compare to previous years in terms of just quantity?
It's similar to what they have been doing. It's scaled back from what the Arvada Center used to do pre-pandemic for sure. But I would say this is kind of par for the course in terms of industry standard at the moment with smaller regional theaters like the Arvada Center.
Yeah, I mean, I love that year. That season a few years ago when they did 3 shows in the Black Box in Rep, which was there, and those were 3 really great shows that I really enjoyed. So, anyway, so that's so you can hear more about that next week in my conversation with Lynn. What else?
So a cohort of Colorado arts leaders went to Washington, D.C. last week to advocate for the value of arts and continued funding. According to our friend John Moore of the Denver Gazette's story that he shared over the weekend. So this coalition was led by Christine Crampton Day, who is the executive director of the Colorado Business Committee for the Arts. And the team included Day, the executive director of Colorado Creative Industries, Josh Blanchard, the Downtown Grand Junction's David Go, Colorado Theater Guild president and friend of the podcast, Betty Hart, and Creative West's Cameron Green and Paul Nguyen.
Okay. Yeah, it's certainly an interesting time to make a trip to the Capitol to ask for more federal funding. It's like, hey, let's go talk to some walls and posts.
Very true, but the leaders say that this trip was planned well before the results of the recent election were known. This advocacy work that they do is repeated by a similar coalition from Colorado arts leaders roughly every 2 years or so. And funnily enough, the first day of their meetings was actually the same day that Trump was making his contentious joint congressional address. So I'm glad they got in before all that. Might have been, I bet conversations got a little awkward on on the next day.
Good. Yep.
They were received by staffers from the offices of Senators Michael Bennet and John Hickenlooper and Representatives Diane DeGette, Joe Neguse, Jason Crow, and Brittany Peterson.
Yeah, that sounds like all Democrats. Didn't they talk to anybody across the lines with Republicans?
That is a good observation. Yes, they were able to speak with Republican Jeff Hurd, but they were not able to talk with Lauren Boebert, Jeff Crank, or Gabe Evans.
What? Wait a minute. Boebert didn't want to discuss her wild night at the DCPA seeing Beetlejuice with arts leaders? I mean, she could advocate for private viewing rooms at the Buell or something like that.
That would certainly make her behavior perhaps less egregious if it was less visible. I don't know why Lauren Boebert would not want to discuss that grope felt around the world with people. She's certainly a showwoman, so you'd think maybe she'd be on board for the value of supporting arts, but she was not open to chatting. So to those who were open to conversation, the delegation advocated not only for NEA funding to be extended, but also for upcoming legislative proposals like the CREATE Act, which, among other things, would allow for loan opportunities for artistic entrepreneurs, and the Arts Education for All Act, which would expand arts education in schools.
Yeah, well, it's sorry to even think about how, I mean, these people are cutting aid for, dying people dying of AIDS and all kinds of other things. So it's hard to imagine that, they will be promoting arts funding and we may just have to be in the wilderness for the next, hopefully, just 4 years until, federal funding for that can be loosened back up. It's a real tragedy among many tragedies going on right now. But in our neck of the woods, in our wheelhouse, it's certainly going to be felt by a lot of arts organizations. So
I think it's still important that this coalition went directly to those in power and lobbied for it, because I think repetition of the hard numbers of the economic impact of the arts, as well as the kind of educational value of the arts, making sure that those numbers are constantly put in front of legislators will make voting this stuff down at least harder for them, make them feel bad, maybe as people.
You got to make noise. Did you also see that Trump added a couple more winners to the board of the Kennedy Center, including a couple of Fox hosts like Maria Bartiromo and one other? It's just unbelievable.
Well, it's good to know that the meritocracy is back in this country. Only the best and the brightest at the Kennedy Center.
That's right. That's really sad. Anyway, moving on.
Yeah, I just wanted, since we are going to move on, I want to quickly hold space for the fact that Wicked star Cynthia Erivo is set to speak at CU Boulder's 77th Annual Conference on World Affairs in April. So the Emmy, Grammy, and Tony Award-winning actor and 3-time Oscar nominee will join Stefano K. Johnson, who is the director of CU Boulder's Center for Leadership, in a keynote discussion about her life and experience being a woman in the arts industry. The CU press release did not specify when she would speak, so if you're trying to plan for this, just block off any time between April 7th and 11th.
Okay. I didn't realize she was that close to an EGOT, so she just needs to pick up an Oscar next year, and she can be one of the select few, huh?
It seems like her chances for Wicked for Good, also known as Wicked Part 2, they seem pretty good. She's definitely a front runner for another nomination, and we'll see about the win. It is certainly a more emotional chapter in the Wicked saga, so yeah, we'll see.
All right. Hey, just a quick remembrance here to Sonia Ellingbo. She's a longtime Littleton resident. She had a bookstore in town for many years and later started as an arts journalist, and she wrote many a theater review in her day for the Littleton Times and Littleton Independent, as well as the Colorado Community Media paper. So she retired a couple of years ago, and I just saw that she passed on February 22nd at age 94. So rest in peace, Sonia. She did a great job covering lots of local theater over the years. So she's one of the greats.
Absolutely.
On a lighter note, I wanted to give a shout out to Gretchen and Gio Rosselli, who we ran into at the New Play Summit 2 weekends ago. She heard Tony's voice and she was like, I recognize your voice from the podcast. And we were like, oh, wow, he's famous. So that was pretty funny.
Yeah, that was definitely a wild moment. We were talking in the stairs after coming out of a reading on Sunday. It was the first reading on Sunday, which was the David Meyer's Yogurt play.
Right.
And we were debriefing between the two of us, talking, going up the stairs. And all of a sudden, Gretchen turns around and is like, I recognize your voice. I know you. And I was like, I was like, I've never met this woman in my life. How do we know each other? And she was like, I listened to you on the OnStage Colorado Podast. And I was like, whoa, wow.
Yeah.
We're out spotted in the wild. That's super cool. So it was great to meet her, like you said.
Yeah. Yeah, so Gretchen has contributed a few reviews to the site and is generally a big supporter and a podcast listener. So it was great to meet her in person with her husband, Gio. So they're former New Yorkers who live near me on the south side of town, and they're frequent. I think they both listen to the pod. So they're very cool folks who still retain a lot of their urban cool. I actually felt a little schlubby around them. They really looked, they were dressed really nice, and I was really digging Gio's cool felt Kangol hat. And I was like, I wonder if I could rock something like that. And I thought, probably not.
Maybe leave that to him. But Gretchen, Gio, if you guys are listening right now, I hope your Oscar party was amazing. That's what they were on their way to go do after the New Play Summit reading that day. So I hope you guys had fun watching the Oscars.
Yep. What else?
Yeah, so our final bit of news for this week is just a quick congratulations to our friends at Creede Rep, who have a new documentary about them that debuted on Sunday, March 9th at the prestigious South by Southwest Film Festival in Austin, Texas. This film was shepherded by Oscar-nominated director Kane Corn Cooperman, who previously did Joe's Violin. And this project, which is entitled Creede, USA, takes a nuanced look into the small mountain town of Creede, its rich history, people, and the myriad of points of view that make up its community. So hoping to see this film eventually get a wider release. But Kate Berry, who is a longtime member of actor and staff member, went to Austin to represent the company there at the film's release. Sounds really cool, but fortunately no word has been given at this time about when it will be released wider to the world. So just keep watching. We'll keep you posted as we know more. But also you can follow Creede USA online if you search that film up. To social medias and stuff are there.
That's great. Yeah. We'll definitely let you know when that one becomes available somewhere. So, all right. Well, let's move on to our main topic of new play festivals. So, any production you've ever loved had to start somewhere. And so we wanted to focus on the new play process, of which Colorado is a pretty well-endowed state.
Very true, yeah. Although this new play development is not as supported as it once was, it is an important part of determining what needs work and what works about shows through these kind of workshops and public stage readings that are hosted. So when I was speaking with Colorado New Play Summit participant Carrie Perloff, who wrote If God Were Blue, she told me, quote, "It's so important that the Denver Center has continued to keep this summit alive because we've lost so many opportunities like this. We've lost the Humana Festival in Louisville, the Lark in New York, and so many more. The opportunity for artists to come together and stage the early work, and feel safe to incubate is just gold," which I thought was incredibly powerful and just speaks to the importance of the process of these staged readings and getting feedback from a live audience who is there to see this new work.
Yeah. Yeah, we've talked a number of times and with different artistic directors and other theater artists about how a play, the script is just one part of the whole, path. And so having an audience is another huge part of it. And also having collaborators who are taking that script and doing things with it that the playwright may not even have imagined. So hearing that play read out loud by good actors or any actors, it's an invaluable experience. So the New Play Summit is an excellent opportunity. So I know we've talked about this a lot in the last couple of podcasts, so we can probably kind of zoom past this. But, it's the Denver Center's annual. They've been doing it for, 20 years or something like that. And it just wrapped up the 19th summit. We heard 4 new plays there. And then there's also two plays from previous summits were in full productions at the Denver Center this winter. So they've done 78 plays, including some well-known things like the Whale, The Legend of Georgia McBride, The Book of Will, Rattlesnake Kate, and lots of others.
Yeah, and I think the pros of this festival is that it really is a national gathering. You have theater makers and artists, not only from all over Colorado, but really from around the country who are coming to hear these new plays out loud, which I think is a part of the reason why it has such a strong track record in terms of its plays getting subsequent productions, even if they're not chosen ultimately by the Denver Center theater company themselves to stage a full production. You'll often see these other productions go on and get produced by other regional theater companies around the world. It just wasn't a right fit here in Denver, but that doesn't mean that they weren't really strong plays. And so you often will see them get produced down the line. And as we've mentioned before on this podcast, the quality of the staged readings that the team at the Denver Center puts together really is impeccable. They're assembling some really high caliber actors to come together. And even though it is just scripts on a music stand, it feels like so much more than that, because you can really the actors that they have really allow you to imagine the fullness of the playwright's text.
Yeah, when I was talking to Chris Coleman a few weeks ago about the New Play Festival, he talked about just that, how sometimes people even like the reading better than the full production, because it's like reading a novel versus watching a film. You're able to use your imagination. And once you kind of get into the groove of a play, you almost forget that you're not watching a full stage thing. You're just enjoying it for the story. And so if it's a great script, that can be a wonderful experience. So yeah, I know, there's some criticism that, there's not as much Colorado talent. It seems to me like they should have at least one of the 4 plays be a Colorado playwright, and maybe use some more of the actors. There's some local actors on these readings, but I don't. There's certainly plenty of talent here in Colorado that they wouldn't really need to bring in actors from other states for that. But that's their call. So.
Yeah, and the other kind of common criticism about the summit as it's evolved over the years is that it's been significantly scaled back. And I mean that both in terms of the number of plays that they are selected to be produced. It used to pretty regularly be at least 5 plays were selected to be developed. Now it's more consistently down to 4. And also the length of the festival itself. It used to be across 2 weekends, and really by doing it across 2 weekends, that allows the writers to actually hear feedback from a first weekend of performances, do rewrites, rework the play, and then have another crack at it. So you really get a lot more development time and a lot more bang for your buck in that. But it has been condensed now to what we know as of in its current iteration, which is just 2 days, Saturday and Sunday.
Yeah. I have to say, I don't mind being into one weekend. It was kind of a lot to find room for 2 weekends, but I understand from the development standpoint, it was nice for them to have that first round and then have the week to do rewrites and things like that. But so another one is that I'm into is the Colorado New Play Festival and Steamboat Strings that's been around for 26 years. What do we know about this one, Tony?
So this festival has a very enviable track record and has a history of more than 70% of its works moving on to regional and New York stages. So many of them actually go on to have multiple productions. And this festival has every year a week-long festival in which stories are developed by playwrights. And this includes stuff like Refuge by Andrew Rosendorf, which was seen at Curious Theater Company a couple years ago. The Thin Place, which Betsy announced on the podcast last week that they would be doing in their upcoming season. And Dance Nation, which Family Theater Company is going to be doing locally in its current season. So these are plays that you've heard of that are getting developed at the Colorado New Play Summit, which I think is quite impressive. It's not maybe as flashy or well-known as the New Play Summit, but in terms of the caliber of plays that they're selecting, it honestly rivals the New Play Summit.
Yeah. Yeah, I never hear from those folks. I haven't hasn't really been on my radar. I need to check on it, but I would like to get that on the calendar. So if you're listening,
yeah. Well, their next festival is June 8th, so there is still quite a bit of time. If any of our listeners are curious and going to check it out themselves, you definitely can. If you live in the Denver metro area, it's a little bit of a drive there, but it sounds like it's well worth it.
Beautiful beautiful place to go visit. So another one down south is, we were just talking about Creede Rep. They also have the Headwaters program, which is a new play festival that takes place in late August, sort of at the tail end of their summer rep season. And so they do, readings of never produced new plays. And when they receive a commission, they collaborate with Creede through a series of online and in-person workshops, including a stage reading at the annual New Play Festival, and often they go on to full-scale production in the main stage at a future in another year.
Yeah, and so they've been doing this for a number of years. The 13th annual Headwater New Play Festival is going to take place this upcoming August 29th through the 31st, and it's going to feature the premiere of the 42nd annual Young Audience Outreach Tour, Raquel's Purple Pineapple Adventure, and a sneak peek into other new works in development at Creede Rep. So also have not personally been to this one, but you and I both been talking, going back and forth. This is the year we're going to do it.
We're going to figure it out.
We're going to figure out how to make it to Creede. I know I certainly am. I'm working on that right now because I want to get out there to see their work. And I hear the town is pretty incredible. So beautiful. They made a documentary about it or something.
Yeah. It's been like 5 years since I've been down. So. Also down south, the Durango Play Fest. So this every summer, professional and emerging playwrights, actors, and directors gather for a week to develop and workshop new plays before showcasing them at stage readings in front of local audiences. So similar format. So they actually have a lot of, they've done 26 plays by 20 playwrights performed since it started. So it's a much newer one than some of these others that started in 2018. So 13 plays have been produced or had readings around the country. And it's had over 5,000 attendees during its 6th season. So this year, it's going to be the 7th annual one will be June 24th through 29th. So coming up real soon.
The next one on our list is one that we are both quite familiar with. It's done by our friends over at Local Theater Company. It is their annual Local Lab. And this festival focuses on new plays, small cast musicals, hybrid or devised theater pieces, and selected project creators are provided resources to conduct a workshop of their material before presenting it to a public, followed by a curated post-show conversation with the artistic staff and audience members that moves the new work towards full production. And oftentimes, the plays that are featured at their local lab will find their way onto their season, as was the case with their recent Chasing Breadcrumbs. That was at their local lab the previous year, and then became a part of their season. So it's a pretty big part of their new play process over at Local Lab. And this year is the 14th annual festival. It's going to be April 25th through the 27th at the Nomad Playhouse in Boulder, and it's going to feature 3 stage readings of new plays, playwright panels, post-show conversations, parties, and a whole lot more.
Cool. Okay, so it's not in the dairy this year, which it usually been. So at the Nomad.
That's right.
Cool. I still haven't.
Mixing it up.
I haven't been in the Nomad, so I'm looking forward to checking that out. Also in Boulder, the 8th annual New Play Festival at CU Boulder. So this is features new works which haven't been professionally produced or published by CU Boulder at Boulder graduates and undergraduates, faculty, staff, and recent alums. So they've got several categories: full length, 1-act, 10-minute plays, and performance scenarios, whatever those are. So and so all the selected works receive stage readings and they get feedback. So.
Yeah, and so over 60 CEU students across multiple departments and majors are involved in the 9 plays in this year's New Play Festival. So the festival kicks off on Monday, April 24th and runs through Sunday, April 30th in the acting studio there. So if you want to check it out, you can.
This next one isn't necessarily a new play festival, but you'll see a lot of new works there. This Denver Fringe Festival, like many fringe festivals around the world, it's it's an open application festival. It's got a lower bar for entry than a lot of these other festivals, and because they just have a lot more slots to fill. So its main goal is to support independent artists. So we also promote access. What's this? We also promote. It's really affordable. There's a lot of fun. There's a lot of different things going on during the Fringe Festival, and you'll see not just theater, but comedy and immersive and all kinds of other, types of the circus. You name it, it's at Fringe, right?
Absolutely. And a lot of the stuff that starts at Fringe will eventually get refined and go on to do fully produced productions around town. I know the FOMO, which was a winner of a recent Fringe event, found its way over at the now defunct Benchmark Theater to do a full production. But that was a cool thing to see, where you get to really kind of see how the play evolves from that initial, what was essentially a workshop performance of it at the Fringe Festival. So if you're interested in experiencing the Fringe yourself, the 6th annual Fringe Festival will be held June 4th through 8th at a number of venues across Denver and Aurora.
All right, another one that we've recently talked about on the pod, the Millabo Art Theater in Colorado Springs, is they've got the Lost Years Short Play Festival coming up real soon, March 13th to 23rd. So these are plays having to do with sort of the pandemic and its aftermath. But they also do this. They've been doing a play series, new play series about Colorado women. So the what do they call it?
I believe it's called the Women's Theater Festival.
Okay. So this year, that's April 13th to 23rd, and the theme this year is Travelers from Here to There. So that sounds really cool at the Millabo down in Colorado Springs.
And our final pick for a new play facilitator kind of lab is Curious Theater Company, who recently launched the 24-Hour Play Festival, which is in collaboration with the 24-Hour Plays and they project, which is a national group, and they staged 6 brand new plays to the community that were produced in only 24 hours. And this national program has been bringing together creative communities since 1995 to produce plays and musicals written all in a single day. So Curious is proud to join that tradition since 2024, and it's a pretty cool way to do new work in a really quick kind of flash setting, and then actually get it fully produced on the stage. So hoping we will see the return of the 24-hour play festival this year. And do also want to note, Curious Theater has previously hosted the New Voices New Play Festival, but there's been no word on whether that program will continue. So if we hear from it, we'll definitely update you.
Yeah. So yeah, if you are, and this isn't probably the full list. I know some other theaters are probably doing some version, maybe on a smaller scale. So if we missed one, let us know. But you're hoping to get into one. If you're a playwright and you want to get into one of these festivals, if you join a writers group, there's several at the Dairy and at the Denver Center, classes that can kind of give you an entree into that. There's the Western Colorado Writers Forum, the Lighthouse Writers Workshop, and typically, if you're a Colorado playwright, I think even the Denver Center's Colorado New Play Summit, you can submit without representation, which isn't the case for other writers outside of Colorado.
That's right. So, we are going to take a quick break now to hear from our sponsors. And when we return, we will share our top 10 Colorado headliners, as well as Alex's interview with Brian and Regan about the Menagerist.
The OnStage Colorado podcast is supported in part by the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center, whose production of Naked Mole Rat Gets Dressed, The Rock Experience, runs through March 30th. It's a rock and roll parable with a significant message for today's audience based on the hit children's book by Mo Willems. Tickets at fac.coloradocollege.edu. We're also supported by the Aurora Fox Arts Center, whose production of The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime runs March 21st through April 13th. The play earns 6 Tony Awards, including Best Play, and delves into the mind of a remarkable young man on a quest for the truth. Tickets at aurorafoxartscenter.org. Also supporting OnStage Colorado is Denver's Curious Theater, presenting Downstate March 13th through April 13th. This hard-hitting play shares the story of 4 men convicted of sex crimes who share a group home post-incarceration. Tickets at curioustheater.org. OnStage Colorado receives support from Candlelight, presenting the classic Rodgers and Hammerstein's musical Oklahoma, where a high-spirited rivalry between local farmers and cowboys provides a colorful backstory for Curly, a charming cowboy, and Lori, a feisty farm girl, to play out their love story. Running through March 30th in Johnstown. Tickets at coloradocandlelight.com. Support for OnStage Colorado also comes from the Boulder Ensemble Theater Company, Betsy, whose staged reading series, Plays with Fire, runs March 7th through 30th at the Boulder Dairy Center. Tickets at betc.org. All right, we are back and ready to hit this week's Colorado headliner. So these are some of the upcoming shows we think you should know about in no particular order. So Tony, let's start with you as usual. What have you got?
Kicking us off with To the Bone, produced by Three Leeches Theater over in Lakewood, which is running March 12th through the 22nd And this play is set 20 years after 20 years. The tough but deeply caring Kelly has finally arrived to meet the daughter she gave up for adoption in high school. Geneva, who has always grown up with a fair amount of privilege, has been ready to meet her mom for years. But when she arrives at Kelly's decidedly blue-collar Boston home with her roommate, she's a little unsure what to make of her birth mom, aunt, and brother. And when Kelly reveals why she's asked her daughter to come, it's not clear if their newfound relationship will last beyond the evening. So I've never seen this play, but it sounds like a pretty intense family melodrama.
Yeah. All right. My first one is a much more familiar title. You Can't Take It With You. So this is the classic quirky comedy by Kaufman and Hart that'll be at Magic Circle Players in Montrose, March 14th through 29th. It's it's about a romance between a young man from a kind of a snobby Wall Street family and a young woman who's from this really sort of batty family with, one guy's like blowing shit up and there's the wacky aunt. I mean, it's a really fun play. And it's cool that Magic Circle is doing this one.
Mine is not quite as lighthearted as yours. It is the one-person play, Every Brilliant Thing, being produced by Breckenridge Backstage Theater, March 12th through the 29th. And this is a play about depression and the links that we go to for the ones we love. So when the protagonist is 6 years old, their mom is in the hospital, finds it hard to be happy. And so the protagonist starts to make a list of everything that's brilliant about the world to leave on her pillow. And they know that she's read it because she begins correcting the list for spelling. So soon this list takes on a life of its own. And as anybody who's seen the play will tell you, it's a quite touching piece. Although it does, trigger warning, it does explore some themes of suicide and things like that. So if that's not a topic you're interested in seeing a play about, maybe steer clear of this one. But it sounds like this adaptation by Breck is going to be a really good one. It features Hugh Nguyen in the central role and is being directed by producing artistic director Jacqueline Stone.
All right. Well, my next one, I didn't realize we were talking about this when I put this on my list a couple of days ago, but it's The Lost Years. This is the play festival at Millville Arts Theater about the pandemic and the aftermath. So we just mentioned that, so I won't say any more. And I'll just add my next one is this one is from Miscreant Theater Collective. This will be at Roaming Gnome Theater in Aurora, March 13th through 30th. It's The Ever and After. So this is, I'm looking forward to seeing this. It's some kind of a post-apocalyptic something. Do you know any more about this one, Tony?
I've only seen the really kind of campy poster design that's been going around on Facebook. And
yeah,
I'm aware that this play has been produced before. It seems kind of a very eccentric dystopian piece. You said you are going to go check it out?
Yeah, well, I was really impressed by the last show of theirs. I saw The Pillow Man.
That's right.
And I love post-apocalyptic stuff, so I was like, well, I gotta go check this out. So.
Cool. My next piece is not dystopian or post-apocalyptic. It's actually all the way the other way. We're getting mythological up in here. We're at Su Teatro. They are doing Ziania, Always and Forever, March 13th through the 30th. And this is a world premiere play about one of the greatest love stories in Mexico's history. This is the tragic legend of Popo and Ista, who stand together as two volcanoes towering over Mexico City. With humor, passion, and amor, the story of Popo and Ista is interwoven with a modern-day story of love. It's being directed by Mica Garcia de Benditas, who is going to be taking over Su Teatro after her father, Tony Garcia, retires. She's actually directing and writing this piece, so it's kind of a really cool way to get a sense of her artistic vision of the company. And I was talking with her about it. She says it's still going to have a lot of the signature things that make a Su Teatro piece what it is, like music and things like that, but it's got a little bit more of a romantic vibe, which is not always something that's seen on those stages.
Okay, cool. Yeah, they've been a little quiet lately, so good to see they've got something on the main stage, and then they have all their educational stuff going on. My next highlight is our headliner is not necessarily a play, but I felt like it's smart. It's St. Patrick's Day weekend. It's on a Monday this year, so I'm imagining everybody be partying on Saturday night, I guess. But this one is from the Denver Brass. It's Celtic Awakening at the Denver Newman Center at DU. March 15th and 16th. So it's kind of an interesting story. So they're doing it in collaboration with Celtic Steps Irish Dance, Rocky Mountain Highland Dancers, Celtic Colorado Pipes and Drums, and Irish Tenor, and an Irish tenor named Todd Teske. So this is, it says the ancient runes hewn into the mossy boulders that dot Streedac Beach in Highlands County, Sligo. And this there's all this long description about this legend of this local villagers and a great sea beast and all this stuff. So this is sort of the theme of this concert/dance performance. So it sounds like a lot of fun to get your Irish up in preparation for the 17th.
Great pick, Alex. My next pick is not quite as lucky or fun. It is Downstate by Curious Theater Company in Denver. Previews for this begin March 13th through the 14th, and the play runs March 15th through April 13th. And the fourth play in Curious's season has been called everything from a masterwork to scathing to audacious. That's because this play follows the story of four men who have been convicted of sex crimes who are sharing a group home together post-incarceration. And the plot follows a man who shows up at this home to confront his childhood abuser. And so very intense play about like where we draw the line between justice and retribution and when we can forgive a person, what acts are forgivable in society. So these are all things that Curious Plays are very known to explore. They love dabbling in these kind of morally gray plays that make you feel all icky inside. As this one is being directed by Curious's artistic company member, Christy Montour-Larson, and the regional premiere is by Pulitzer Prize-winning author of Clybourne Park, Bruce Norris, which at Clybourne Park is currently playing at the Arvada Center. So pretty good year for him in Colorado so far.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Well, my last one is a biggie coming to the Denver Center Buell Theater in a touring Broadway production. It's Life of Pi, real familiar title because it was a really popular book made into a very popular film. So this is it's a story about a 16-year-old boy named Pi who survives on a lifeboat with four companions, a hyena, a zebra, an orangutan, and a big royal Bengal tiger. So apparently this one's got a lot of like big puppetry, big stagecraft. It's a real jaw-dropping visuals, they say, and so it sounds like it'll be a lot of fun. So I'll be at that one. I'm sure you will be too, Tony, right?
I am currently planning on it, particularly because it's so noteworthy for the Denver's Broadway division to produce a play as a part of its season rather than musicals. Those are so much more common to tour, but it sounds like the spectacle of this production warrants that.
Yeah, what was the last one I was thinking? Was it It's Killing a Mockingbird was like the last time there was a play.
That's right.
As part of that, and it's pretty rare. It's not a musical.
My final pick for a headliner this week is Strange Creatures, a bizarre mythos for all ages at Boulder Public Library's Canyon Theater, March 15th. And this is a whimsical journey where puppets, clowns, and other stage creatures bring to life an extraordinary world of mystery and enchantment through physical theater, handmade props, and costumes. So the show is a series of vignettes in the Mominskantz style cabaret. And for those who are not Swedish, that is a Swiss mask theater troupe who performs in surreal mask and prop-oriented style. It's very exaggerated, heightened, and over the top. And organizers of this event say, quote, "The show is for all ages, but is especially for adults." All right, well, that is it for this week's headliners, but don't go anywhere because we are going to throw it over to Alex's interview with Brian Colonna and Regan Linton.
Thanks. Yeah, I never thought I would be interviewing Regan Linton and Brian Colonna at the same time.
At the same time?
Surprise.
We didn't think we'd ever be sitting together.
Yeah, really close.
Yeah, and Brian's freaking me out because you got rid of your beard. You just have a stash.
I know. I'm freaked out every time I look in the mirror. It's I get some kind of acting choice to change character by changing facial hair. So for whatever reason, the gentleman caller requires this mustache, and I will grow the beard back as soon as humanly possible.
Okay.
After the run.
All right. Well, we're here with Brian Colonna and Regan Linton, and we're going to talk about The Menagerist, which is the new show from Buntport Theater. So real quick, Brian is a co-founder and artistic everything, along with Aaron Rollman, Eric Edborg, Hannah Dugan, and Samantha Schwartz. So the Buntport has been around for a number of years, and they do all unique original shows, and they do all the acting and pretty much everything from bottle washing to cleaning the bathrooms to everything in between. And so Regan Linton, people may recognize your name. Regan is the former artistic director for Family, Colorado's disability affirmative theater company. But you left Colorado a few years ago, and now you're back. Where'd you go? Can you remind me?
Where'd I go? I went a lot of places. My main place, I went out to DC. I moved to DC to be closer to my nieces out there, and had heard really good things about the DC theater community, and so did a couple shows out there, and worked with the Kennedy Center and National Theater and Arena on a few things, and did some shows elsewhere. But then my family moved back here, and I have missed Colorado and missed the artistic community here. So it kind of gave me a reason to come back and be back in Denver now. So here I am.
Right. Well, we're happy to have you back.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Brian, before we talk about the upcoming show, and I know this is a tough question, but can you explain what Buntport is a little beyond what I just kind of sketched out?
Sure. We're an ensemble, and we focus on collaboration. We've been at it now for I think we're on our 26th season here in Denver, and we went to college together, the core of us. And we kind of started working together then, and we write all of our own stuff. And so I think the term that people use now that we didn't know then was devised theater is sometimes a term that gets thrown around. Although that sometimes makes people think that that the work isn't scripted, which in our case it is. There's a script for everything. And our process is sort of just a big collaboration. There isn't a set director or designer or, traditional roles in that sense. We all take on multiple roles when we're building something, and the script is built up with the set, and we just try to do it all. And in this case, in the case of work like the Menagerist, throughout the years we've done a lot of adaptation of pieces, Moby Dick, Don Quixote, Titus Andronicus, and so playing with a text is something that we've kind of practiced over the years. Is that a kind of an answer for what we are?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, so I've been seeing shows at Buntport for quite a while, and it's your last one had to do with an incident on a bridge in Chicago that was really, really hilarious. And I remember you as Napoleon at one point. There was one about what was it, 101 No's or something about this, just a small incident from a distant chapter in film history. So wherever you get the inspiration, they just kind of, you grab something. Is there any way to possibly say, yes, that's a Buntport idea? Or is it?
Gosh, I don't know. We actually have pitch meetings where we pitch ideas to each other. And a lot of times there's just dead silence. And then occasionally someone will be like, oh, what about, we go back and forth a lot. Gosh, I don't know. We usually at least try to find a quirky way into something. I would say that's maybe a Buntport kind of thing. Like if it's a story everyone knows, how can we, what will be our weird access point, whether it's design wise or storytelling. I think that in the beginning we were interested in a lot of sort of, and we still are, but we had shows where there was a transformational aspect to like the set and design, where one thing would become something else. Over the years, we've tried a lot of different things, but I don't know. Kafka on Ice sticks out as a kind of Buntport thing. We had a student whose father manufactured or sold this fake ice that ice skaters use to practice in the off season. It's basically big tiles of plastic, and you spray it with some Armor All and strap on your ice skates. And when we were chatting about who would definitely not want to be a character in an ice capade, Kafka came up. And so then, that turned into the interesting in for dealing with the metamorphosis. So that's maybe an example of what I think is kind of a Buntporty take on something.
That's great. Yeah. Buntport, I guess, can be a verb. We're going to Buntport this idea.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's turn to the Menagerist. So all Buntport shows have a very terse description. So this one says, a comedy about being stuck in a tragedy with your annoying unicorn friend and a handful of imaginary spoons. Yeah. And so that tells you like zero about the show. But let's hear it. How did you, Regan, come to be collaborating with Buntport on this show?
Well, I mean, I've always admired Buntport, I think, for the reason that Brian was talking about, that, it always feels like an unexpected twist on something, a kind of offbeat approach that is typically absurd and funny, but also thoughtful. And so, being somebody who lives with a disability and performs with a disability in a wheelchair, I just get really tired of kind of the same sort of rote representation of disability in theater, in narratives. And I really wanted to change things up. And I think often what's missing is absurdism or humor and things, laughing about things in a way that often people feel like they can't laugh about disability because it's precious and it's, sacred or, tragic. And so I think there was something very appealing to coming to Buntport and saying, hey, let's create something that kind of subverts these typical tropes around disability. And when we started talking about like, okay, because often they'll take something that is already an artistic work or, out there in the common social artistic sphere, we were talking about, some of the things that get done over and over. And for me, as a wheeling actor, I've been asked, over the years, numerous times to do Glass Menagerie because it has this character of Laura who is kind of described as having like a very nebulous disability. So often with theater companies are looking to do a classic work and, trying to be a little bit more inclusive and find something that, where they could throw in a disabled actor, that's the one they end up with. So I've joked with some of my disabled friends that it's like, if you're a disabled actress with a, physical disability, you could just get stuck in kind of a rabbit hole of like playing Laura over and over and over and over again. So we kind of started from that premise and, then we're able to dig into beyond just disability, like some of the things that in the Glass Menagerie, Tennessee Williams kind of laid out as like this, kind of very, at the time, very new and avant-garde and risky and, edgy theater. But now a lot of it has just kind of become similarly like its own sort of trope in terms of what we think of classic theater being.
Okay. So did you collaborate on the script?
Yeah. So we started talking about this probably, I don't know, maybe like a year ago. But then back in the fall, I was still in DC, but we started having Zoom meetings. And then I got back to Colorado. And so we started meeting and we would, each of us would write a bit and then we'd kind of start cobbling together and see what we liked, what we didn't, kind of what Brian was talking about with, pitch ideas. And that was like so fun, because I've worked mostly in like a very traditional quote unquote theater space, where you have the playwright and the playwright is writing the play and getting the notes and developing the work. And then we come in as actors, but like this is so much more, I find it more fun and more creative in a very fundamental way where it's like you have a variety of artists who are like throwing stuff out. And again, there's not preciousness. It's just like what sticks, what enlivens us, what pops, and through that we started to kind of find an overall arc for the show. And I mean, all of these guys are so brilliant. I mean, I don't know. Sometimes there were things where I was like, that's never going to go together. And somehow they found a way to link it up and have a through line.
That's great. So that definitely there's this reference to the Glass Menagerie, which is, it's kind of ironic because you were just saying that's the thing that you always get cast in, and here you are in a way. But this is not the Glass Menagerie. What's the spin?
Well, the spin is basically that the takeoff from what Regan said about having to be playing this one character over and over again. So there's kind of this self-awareness in the play. We've got the characters represented, and they're basically working out over and over the gentleman caller scene. and so it never goes right. But in the process of that, we discuss classic theater, we discuss disability and its representations, and what metaphors in art end up doing in the world. I think is maybe a heady way to discuss what we're doing, but it's just sort of an absurd piece in which the characters involved in the Glass Menagerie are trying to get through the scene, and they also have an idea about the world outside of the play as well, and it's just they're trying to work it out.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're watching like a rehearsal.
Yeah.
Kind of, or you're watching actors that kind of in this meta space have been stuck in this idea of classical theater or stuck in this particular play for like 80 years and are, experimenting with different ways to do it. And I think any of us that are, actors or artists, but I think particularly actors, because and have to do the same plays over and over once they're deemed like classics, and theater companies constantly bring them back. And there's, I think even in recent years, there's become a lot more aversion or fear around risk-taking of new works, and I have been part of new work processes that took, literally years to develop a new work because there's so much hesitation to just put it up and go for it. So I think, in the kind of quote unquote traditional theater environment, that's what we often, get started. And then if you have an identity that is a unique identity that doesn't fit into the larger pantheon of, you can be in all those classic plays, you just kind of get stuck. So I think we comment a lot on this idea of stuckness, which was also a theme in a lot of Tennessee Williams' work, and specifically Glass Menagerie, of like when you're trying to break out of something, but you're still within it. How can you play to kind of bring something new to life?
I think another sort of jumping off point for us, like when we use a classic piece, and in this case, a play, which, we weren't going to do the play as it is. We had to figure out ways of doing part of it or writing around it. But in kind of looking into it, you discover things that you'd forgotten or things you didn't know. And like Regan said earlier, it was like pretty experimental at the time. And I think Tennessee Williams ended up writing a lot more than we usually see represented on stage. And a lot of it is pretty experimental and strange. Even in the Glass Menagerie, you have when it debuts on Broadway and the publication comes out, he had this idea about titles that were going to be projected or represented on stage in some way. And that's not in one of the printings of the play right after it was on Broadway. You don't get those titles, but we really got into the stage directions, which are pretty elaborate in the Glass Menagerie. And that was kind of a source of inspiration. And also in some of his writings about like, I kind of think of this as a thing that I keep working on. I keep working on the play in weird ways. Of course, something else happens when the public gets a hold of it and it becomes, part of the canon, quote unquote. But I think his mindset was pretty experimental. And I think that the idea of like, oh, we're going to work on the play in the same way that, he might imagine changing characters or changing scenes and kind of workshop it.
Got it. Okay. All right. So Buntport is also known for pretty inventive use of your black box space set wise, and also there's often some sort of lo-fi special effects and things like that. What can we expect to see for the Menagerist?
Well, I think there's a little bit of lo-fi special effects for sure. I think we're also sort of winking at some standard theater convention in terms of like black boxes and acting in that sense. And I think people who are into inflatable floaties, are going to really are going to get some eye candy on this one.
Wheelhouse. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, and so can you tell me who plays who of the Buntport crew? So I'm assuming that Regan, you're Laura in this.
I am Laura. Yes. And then Brian is our gentleman caller. And Eric is playing Tom, my brother, Laura's brother. Hannah is the mother, the very well-known mother, Amanda. And then we've added a fun life-size character, which is Aaron playing the unicorn, which is so iconic in the original play.
Right.
And also a metaphor for Regan, Laura. Oh God. I'm becoming
Perfect. That was perfect.
We're all becoming each other.
All right. So, Regan, when you talk about like some of these tired tropes of disabled people portrayed in a film or TV or on stage or whatever it is, I mean, what would you like to see to, would it just be like actors just appearing? So like a wheeled actor, just like, it's not even commented on. They're just another actor on stage, that kind of thing.
Yeah. I mean, we could probably have like a 10-hour philosophical discussion and theoretical discussion on this. But what it really comes down to is that, disability is often seen through a non-disabled lens, and I've been on both sides of the coin. I grew up my first 20 years where I didn't identify as having a disability. I was on two legs and then I was in a car accident and started using a wheelchair. So I understand that perspective of like, if you don't have a disability and you see people with disabilities, it feels like, oh, well, that's the thing that happened to them, right? Like they had to start using a wheelchair. They, lost their sight or, whatever the circumstance is, as opposed to thinking of it as like, oh no, this is just a human being that moves through the world in a different way with different, different things going on with their body, their brain. So I think that, the biggest thing that I try to reinforce in theater or the larger art sphere is just like, again, people with disabilities are just human beings, which means that they're human beings that could play any number of roles. And the disability doesn't always have to be explained as a circumstance that has happened somewhere in the story of the narrative or the story of the play. And so, again, if you just start from, oh, this is a human, they're an artist, they're an actor, they're a performer, great, then I want to consider them from any number of roles. But if you haven't been exposed to disability, or if you don't think of people with disabilities as people first, if you just think of them as, oh, but what are we going to do about their wheelchair? Oh, what are we going to do about their white cane? Oh, what are we going to do about their missing arm? Then, your imagination is going to be limited in terms of how you can envision those actors in those roles. So I really just, most of the work I try to do is about humanizing people with disabilities and just saying, yeah, we're just people, and we can be parents, and we can be best friends, and we can be villains, and we can be, everything. And we don't only have to fit into, the one play from 80 years ago that says, there's a suggested nebulous disability in this character. But, again, I think that's sometimes kind of, it's just difficult. It's difficult for some people who, again, haven't maybe lived near disability, lived with disability, to like, frankly, truly think of people with disabilities as just people.
I think too, the play discusses a particular moment recently in the last, I think it was in 2017, where there was a Broadway production of The Glass Menagerie, and the actress who played Laura was using a wheelchair. Do you remember the actress's name?
Madison Ferris.
Oh yes, Madison Ferris. And there was a lot of strange critical response to that manifestation of disability in The Glass Menagerie. So it's interesting in that way, the way people's idea about this classic were bothered by this kind of alternative staging. And some of it was very bigoted and terrible. And so that was also part of our discussion in terms of like, how do you work with a piece like this? Obviously, Tennessee Williams is maybe intentionally vague or people had strong ideas about the way the disability should be represented, I guess is what I'm trying to say in a convoluted way. And it was a discussion that, we came back to in creating this piece.
Yeah. And ableism is still alive and well in our society, and bigotry and assumptions, just basic assumptions. And I think until we start normalizing disabled bodies by putting them in stories in all different capacities, not just as Laura, not just as Nessa Rose in Wicked, we're not going to get past that to the point where people will see a wheelchair and be like, oh, great, it's just a wheelchair. But I'm really focused on the character of the person who's playing that role, not focused on the wheelchair. But we're still kind of stuck in that space where, especially in theater, I actually think there have been greater gains in film and TV, maybe just because of the literal circumstances of when you're doing that work. And, often theaters are built to be inaccessible. And so getting folks in there is sometimes a challenge. So, again, until we start kind of normalizing disability as part of our human, spectrum, I think that's going to continue to happen, where you have a critic, potentially like being very disdainful towards the representation of a character using someone who has a disability.
And when you talk of tropes, Regan introduced me to an interesting book called Narrative Prosthesis that discusses the representation of disability in literature often. And in this case, in The Glass Menagerie, you have a similar situation with Laura in that, this disability is used as a metaphor in the play to represent fragility and, the glass menagerie and being fragile and broken and all of these things. And so that metaphor outside of the play then turns into something else when people think about how disability is represented and what we think about it. And so that was another aspect in doing it that was interesting to us about how the metaphor in the piece of art exists in the world, which is a different thing than how it exists in the play.
And gets reinforced in the world every time you do the play.
All right. Well, great. I mean, it sounds like it's going to be a really interesting show. I can't wait to see it. I'll be there at opening night. So this is the Menagerist at Buntport Theater. It's taking place on March 7th through 29th. So plenty of opportunity to get there. And, Buntport is a really affordable theater to get to. It's a pay what you can kind of place. There's a honor system bar set up, which is great. So you're not going to get reamed $15 for a drink like you would at the Denver Center or something like that.
Yeah, you'd have to do it to yourself. You'd be like, I'm donating $25 for this drink. Yeah.
Which is totally legit. You should do that anyway. So anyway, well, Regan, Linton, Brian, Colonna, thanks so much for coming on the OnStage Colorado podcast. Break legs all around. Break wheels. Can I say that, Regan?
Break axles, break your face, break your head, whatever. There are lots of options.
Alex, thanks for having us on. And I just want to shout out the work that you do as well for the theater community. Having a podcast like this where we get a chance to talk about the work, and then also, in a market that has had coverage shrink, as I'm sure all the theaters feel in the same way in newspapers and et cetera. It's great to have a group like yours and you doing the work to let people know about what's going on, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks. I appreciate you saying that.
Well, that was a fantastic conversation about the origins of the Menagerist.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that was the first time I've had Buntport on, which surprised me. I hadn't realized I had him on because they're such a staple of Denver theater. So it's great to have on. And Brian is also their marketing guy, so he's the one I'm always bugging for, to get pictures and tickets and stuff like that.
So what else is new or upcoming on the site, Alex? What can people read on OnStageColorado.com?
Yeah, well, it's a little bit of a quiet week. I'll have a review of the Menagerist, and then later in the week we'll have Turn of the Screw from April. That's a show that's taking place at the Ent Center down in Colorado Springs. And then we'll have a review of the aforementioned Downstate from Tammy Matthews, and then also the aforementioned Ever and After from Miscreant that I'll be at coming up. So definitely some stuff coming up on the site.
Cool. And next week on the podcast, we are going to have that aforementioned interview with Lynn Collins to talk all about the Arvada Center's new season.
Yep. And I also have an interview I did that we'll have the following week with Megan Holdham, and she's the founder of Greener Theater Colorado, and she also happens to be a sound engineer at DCPA. And so this is an effort that she started. It's a movement that's not just national, it's an international movement to help theaters not throw out so much shit like, when you're done with the show, try and recycle some of that, sets and props and whatever else it is. So it's a cool effort, and it's a cool conversation I had with her.
That sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to hearing that discussion in the upcoming weeks. And listeners, if you want to stay up to date on what's going on in theaters, comedy venues, dance halls, and opera settings all around the state, subscribe to the OnStage Colorado newsletter, which comes out every Thursday morning.
Yeah, if you like what we're doing, consider leaving a review wherever you're listening now. And please tell other theater lovers in your life about the site, the podcast, the calendar, the newsletter, and all that stuff. So that's all for this week. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Alex Miller.
And I'm Tony Tresca, and we'll see you at the show.